Hey Aman. So in the last video we talked about some big changes that we want to make to the GitWit server. Basically we want to upgrade the code generation so that it can handle multiple files at once. And so we talked about how we're going to do that. But I wanted to, in this video, take a little bit more time to go into detail about how the code generation and the code streaming actually works in GitWit. So as you know, we have our server, which generates code, and then we have the client that receives that stream and then shows the code as it's being generated. But this is actually the second of two streams. The first stream is OpenAI's standard format whenever it's streaming from a server to, for example, ChatGPT. So this format is a little bit more complex, and it streams in very, very small chunks. As you'll see, it streams very small pieces. Now this is fake test data, but this is the format that they're using. And as you can see, each few characters has a timestamp, a model, a long ID, and that's the standard format used by OpenAI. And that gets streamed to our server after we give OpenAI the prompt, and it comes along with all the output text from ChatGPT. Okay, here's the code, I made it for you, the backtick delimiters and the code. And then what the GitWit server actually does is it parses that chunk by chunk, and it puts those chunks into a buffer. And when there's a full line in that buffer and it's ready to be sent, what we do is we actually send, rather than token by token, we send line by line. And so this is our format, our streaming format, which is a little bit simpler. We also have some special messages that we put in here, like when a dependency is detected, we put in a special message giving the version of that dependency that needs to be installed. So what GitWit server really does at the core of it is it's taking this chat output stream from OpenAI, it's parsing that, and then it's restreaming it in a format which is actually useful for the editor, which means it's just code, it's clean, and it has any extra metadata that we want. And now I think you can see a little bit the challenge that we're going to have when we want to stream multiple files at the same time. So now let's have a look at the GitWit server repository. Now you've already done this, but I want to just go through it just to be clear for everyone how this works. So as I just sort of described, the code generation server, it takes an LLM output stream, so the text stream from OpenAI, it puts those chunks, those tokens into a buffer, and then it cleans the code, and it passes the code on line by line, and it also checks to see if there are any dependencies in that code, and if there are, it looks up the right version and then passes that version along. Now, in the case where you're taking a file and you're splitting that into multiple files, there won't be any new packages added during that process, so you actually don't need to worry about this part for that. Now let's just quickly go through the process of setting up the server. So we clone this repository, we run yarn install, and then we run yarn dev. And the last time that we met, we did a few things. So let's have a look at the Git history here. And the last time that we went over this repository, it was February 25th, and we added this testing flag, which disables the authentication on the server, which is important when it's in production, so that the client is verified to be a real user. But in our case, when we're just testing the server, we don't want that. And we also are going to log the output to the console when we're testing the server. So how can we test the server? We just set this testing flag equals true and run yarn dev. So let's go to the repository, and here I have the server running. So I will stop that and I will run that command. Testing equals true, yarn dev. And now the server is running. So now if I would take this example API call, and I'll paste that here into a new terminal, we get the stream line by line. So I'm sure this makes perfect sense to you. We've done all of this already. Now there's one thing that I really wanted to talk about in this video, which is how do I test the GitWit server? Because when I was developing this server, I was creating this parsing algorithm, and I was having the problem that every time I would run the server, OpenAI would give slightly different responses. And that was making it very difficult to find bugs because I couldn't get it to give the same response every time. On top of that, it can be slow, it can be unreliable, and you need an internet connection. So this is the solution that I came up with. Let's go back to this diagram. And so here, OpenAI is passing this stream to the GitWit server. So what I did was I created a mock OpenAI, and that is another server which is running on my laptop. And I simply connected that to the GitWit server. So that is just a TypeScript program, which when it's called, always gives the same pre-planned response every single time. So that allows me to test the server easily and to reproduce bugs while I'm testing. So let's have a look at the code. This is another open source repository called mock OpenAI, and it's super simple. It has just one endpoint, even though in reality, the actual OpenAI server is much more complex and has many more endpoints. So how do we actually use this when it comes to the GitWit server? Well, it's pretty simple. We just go to the .env file, and I've scrolled all the way down, so not to show anyone my keys. And we just add this line, mock API equals, and then localhost 3002. 3000 is where we normally run the client, 3001 is where we normally run the server, so 3002 is the next available port. So after making that change, we do need to actually stop the server and run it again. And now let's go to our test call, and let's run that test call again. And now we got an error. Why did we get an error? Well, we haven't actually started the mock server. So let's go to the server, and if it's the first time that you're using this, you'll just run yarn install. And then to start up the server, we just run yarn dev. So cool, now it's running on port 3002. And now when I run this test call, I get this fake data, this fake dummy data, and it always will say, whatever input I give to it, whatever prompt, it's always going to say my amazing React app and just give this. Now this is great to know that the parsing algorithm is working, and as you can see here, it is working, and it's taking the data that's being streamed from the mock server, and it's turning it into this line-by-line format. So we have two repositories here. One is the actual GitWit server, one is mock OpenAI, which is a trick for testing. And this is the overall architecture of how we take OpenAI responses, we parse the code out of that, and then we turn it into this line-by-line stream that gets passed to the editor. I hope I've explained this clearly, and hopefully it'll be useful for you as you're developing the next version of our code generation server.